Welcome back to our channel, where history's most fascinating figures come to life. Today, we delve into the heart of ancient Rome, a city of marble and intrigue, to uncover the story of one of its most notorious empresses, Empress Messalina. Forget the one-dimensional villain you think you know. We're going to explore the complex, ambitious, and ultimately tragic figure behind the legends. Her story is a whirlwind of power, politics, and survival in the cutthroat world of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. So, grab a seat, and let's journey back to the 1st century AD to witness the dramatic rise and fall of the young empress who dared to play the Game of Thrones, Roman style. Before she was an empress, Messalina was a blue-blooded Roman aristocrat. Born into the heart of the imperial family around 20 AD, her family tree was a who's who of Roman power. Through her mother Domitilla Lepida, she was a great-grandniece of the first emperor, Augustus himself. Her father, Marcus Valerius Messala Barbatus, was also a member of this elite circle. This meant Messalina grew up surrounded by influence, wealth, and the constant, simmering danger that came with being close to the throne. From a young age, she would have learned a critical lesson in world alliances where everything, and a good marriage, was the ultimate political tool. She was a prize, and her family knew it. Little did they know, this young girl possessed an ambition and a charisma that would soon eclipse everyone around her. She wasn't just a pawn, she was a player in the making. Now, let's talk about her other half. Tiberius Claudius Nero Germanicus, or Claudius, as we know him. Born in 10 BC, Claudius was the black sheep of the imperial family. He was a scholar, a historian, but he was also afflicted with a limp and a slight stammer, which led his own family, including the formidable Emperor Augustus and the ruthless Caligula, to dismiss him as an embarrassment. They saw him as weak, politically harmless, and kept him on the sidelines, often as the butt of their cruel jokes. While his relatives were assassinated, exiled, or forced into suicide, Claudius survived precisely because no one took him seriously. He was the family fool, the bumbling academic who preferred dusty scrolls to political maneuvering. Or so they thought. This constant underestimation would become his greatest weapon. Around the year 38 AD, a marriage was arranged. The teenage Messalina, vibrant and in her prime, was wed to Claudius, a man more than 30 years her senior, already twice married, and considered by many to be a political nobody. On the surface, it seemed like an odd match. What could this brilliant young aristocrat see in the awkward, aging scholar? But this wasn't about romance. It was a strategic alliance. For Messalina's family, it was a way to tie themselves even closer to the imperial line. For Claudius, marrying a young, fertile descendant of Augustus bolstered his own fragile position within the family. They were two people on the fringes of power, brought together by circumstance. Neither could have predicted that this union would soon catapult them to the very pinnacle of the Roman world, creating a power couple whose influence would shake the foundations of the empire. The year is 41 AD. Rome is in chaos. The city is reeling from the reign of the tyrannical and erratic Emperor Caligula. His rule was a fever dream of extravagance, paranoia, and bloodshed. He declared himself a living god, appointed his horse as a consul, and executed senators on a whim. The people of Rome lived in fear, and the powerful Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own bodyguards, had had enough. In a swift and brutal conspiracy, they assassinated Caligula, his wife, and his young daughter, plunging the empire into a sudden power vacuum. The Senate, smelling an opportunity to restore the old republic, began to debate. But the Praetorian Guard had other ideas. They weren't about to give up the power they held under the emperors. Imagine the scene. The palace is swarming with soldiers. Senators are scrambling, and the future of the world's greatest empire hangs in the balance. According to the historian Suetonius, the soldiers found a terrified Claudius hiding behind a curtain, certain he would be the next to die. But instead of killing him, they did something extraordinary. In this bumbling, overlooked uncle of the dead emperor, they saw an opportunity. He was a Julio-Claudian, which gave him legitimacy, but he was also someone they believed they could control. In a stunning turn of events, the Praetorian Guard hailed him as the new emperor. The man who had spent his entire life being mocked and underestimated was suddenly the most powerful person in Rome. Claudius, the scholar, the survivor, the man nobody saw coming, had ascended the throne. And just like that, at barely 20 years old, Valeria Messalina was the Empress of Rome. It was a staggering ascent. One moment, she was the wife of a political outcast. The next, she was the most powerful woman in the empire. For a young woman of her ambition and intelligence, this wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Rome was a city still trembling from Caligula's madness, and now it had a new emperor who many still viewed as weak and incompetent. The stage was set for a new kind of power player. Messalina saw the vacuum, the uncertainty, and the potential. She wasn't content to be a decorative figurehead, a dutiful wife, standing in her husband's shadow. She was young, she was beautiful, and now she had access to immense power. She knew that Claudius's grip on the throne was tenuous, and she was determined to secure her own position by any means necessary. The rise of Empress Messalina had begun. From the moment Claudius took power, Messalina began to assert her influence. She understood that in the Roman court, visibility was power. She wasn't just the emperor's wife. She was a symbol of the new regime's stability and future. A key part of this was producing an heir. Within the first 2 years of Claudius's reign, she gave him 2 children, a daughter, Claudia Octavia, and most importantly, a son, Britannicus. The birth of a male heir was a massive political victory. It solidified the succession, strengthened Claudius's claim, and cemented Messalina's status as the mother of a future emperor. She was no longer just a consort. She was the matriarch of the dynasty. Coins were minted with her image, and statues were erected in her honor. She was celebrated across the empire, portrayed as the ideal Roman mother, securing the future of the Julio-Claudian line. But Messalina's ambitions went far beyond the nursery. She quickly became a central figure in Claudius's court, a savvy political operator in her own right. Ancient sources, though hostile, paint a picture of a woman who was deeply involved in the affairs of state. She attended Senate meetings, sat beside Claudius at public trials, and wielded significant influence over imperial appointments and decrees. She built a network of allies, placing her friends and supporters in key positions of power. She understood that loyalty was a currency, and she spent it wisely to create a faction that was devoted to her. To her supporters, she was a decisive and effective partner to the emperor. To her enemies, however, this was a shocking and unacceptable breach of tradition. A woman wielding such public power was seen as unnatural and dangerous, and it earned her a legion of powerful rivals who would later seek to tear her down. Messalina's court was the new center of Roman social and political life, and she presided over it with charisma and style. She was a trendsetter, known for her lavish parties, exquisite jewelry, and fashionable hairstyles that were copied by women across the empire. But this glamour had a purpose. It was a display of the stability and prosperity of the new reign. Her inner circle consisted of powerful senators, wealthy freedmen, and ambitious aristocrats, all vying for her favor. To be in Messalina's good graces meant access to the emperor, promotions, and wealth. To fall out of her favor could mean ruin, exile, or worse. She was the gatekeeper to Claudius, and everyone knew it. This concentration of power in her hands made her both feared and respected. She was playing a dangerous game, but for now, she was winning, building a formidable power base that was entirely her own. Her rise was meteoric, but in the treacherous world of imperial Rome, the higher you climb, the further you have to fall. The seeds of her destruction were already being sown. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the rise of Messalina. We've only just scratched the surface of her incredible story. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more journeys into history's most compelling lives. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode, where we'll explore the dark side of Messalina's power and the scandalous accusations that would seal her fate. We'll see you next time. In the glittering, treacherous world of imperial Rome, power was a game played by men. Swords, armies, and political alliances were the usual currency. But one woman, Valeria Messalina, decided to play with a different set of cards. Ones she held with unmatched skill, her beauty, her charm, and a razor-sharp ambition that could cut through the strongest armor. Picture this: Rome, the heart of an empire, a city of marble and intrigue. and at its center, a young empress who understood something profound about the men who ran it. She knew that while they commanded legions, their hearts and minds could be swayed by a captivating glance, a well-timed word, and an aura of irresistible allure. Messalina wasn't just beautiful. She was a master of wielding that beauty. It wasn't simple vanity. It was a strategic tool, a weapon in a court where a woman's direct influence was limited. Imagine the imperial court, a place buzzing with stern-faced senators, gruff generals, and scheming aristocrats, all jostling for the emperor's favor. In this hyper-masculine environment, Messalina moved like a phantom, her presence both dazzling and disarming. Her charm wasn't just about a pretty face. It was about her intelligence, her ability to read people, to understand their desires, their fears, and their weaknesses. She could engage a stoic philosopher in a deep debate one moment, and share a light-hearted joke with a battle-hardened soldier the next. This adaptability made her magnetic. People weren't just attracted to her, they were drawn into her orbit, eager to please, to share secrets, to become her ally. Her ambition was the engine driving it all. Messalina didn't just want to be the emperor's wife. She wanted to be a player, a force to be reckoned with. She saw how other imperial women were relegated to the background, their roles confined to producing heirs and looking decorative. Messalina refused to accept that fate. She craved influence, not just for personal gain, but to shape the very future of the Roman Empire. She understood that, in her world, a woman's path to power was not through the forum or the battlefield, but through the whispers in the palace corridors and the hearts of powerful men. So, how did she do it? Let's break down her strategy. First, there was the art of presentation. Messalina curated her image with the precision of a master artist. She used the finest silks, the most exquisite jewelry, and hairstyles that set trends across the empire. This wasn't just about looking good. It was about projecting an image of power, wealth, and divine favor. When she entered a room, she commanded attention without saying a word. Her appearance announced that she was not just any woman, but the empress, a figure of immense importance. It was a visual reminder to everyone of her proximity to the ultimate source of power, the Emperor Claudius. But beauty alone is fleeting. Messalina combined it with a keen intellect. She was an avid listener, absorbing the political gossip and strategic discussions that swirled around her. While men might have underestimated her, seeing only her youth and beauty, she was carefully mapping the network of power in the court. She learned who was loyal, who was ambitious, and who was a threat. This intelligence allowed her to use her influence with surgical precision. She could subtly advocate for an ally to receive a promotion or cast a shadow of doubt upon an enemy, often with just a few carefully chosen words whispered to Claudius at the right moment. Think of it like this. In a game of chess, dominated by kings, knights, and rooks, Messalina learned to play as the queen, the most powerful piece on the board, capable of moving in any direction. Her charm opened doors, her beauty captivated her audience, and her intelligence allowed her to navigate the complex politics of the court. She hosted lavish parties, not just for pleasure, but to gather information and build alliances. At these events, she was the brilliant center of attention, guiding conversations, forging connections, and subtly influencing the opinions of Rome's most powerful figures. Men who came to her seeking favor or advancement found themselves utterly enchanted, willing to do her bidding. Her ambition was truly boundless. She wasn't content with securing her own position. She wanted to ensure the succession of her son, Britannicus. Every move she made was calculated to strengthen her son's claim to the throne and eliminate any potential rivals. This made her both admired and feared. To allies, she was a powerful patron, a gateway to imperial favor. To her enemies, she was a ruthless and unpredictable opponent. She used her influence over Claudius to have rivals exiled or even executed, clearing the path for her own agenda. It's easy for history to paint Messalina as a one-dimensional villain, a manipulative seductress. But that's too simple. Her story is a fascinating case study in power and gender in the ancient world. She was a woman born into a system that gave her very little official authority. Instead of accepting her limitations, she took the assets she had: her beauty, her wit, her intelligence, and honed them into formidable weapons. She played the game of Roman politics with the hand she was dealt, and for a time, she played it better than anyone. She understood the psychology of power. She knew that men who prided themselves on their logic and strength were often the most susceptible to the subtle art of persuasion and charm. By making them feel important, desired, and understood, she could guide their actions to suit her own ambitious goals. She was a master puppeteer in a court full of powerful men who believed they were pulling all the strings. Messalina's story forces us to look beyond the simplistic narratives and appreciate the complexity of her character. Was she ambitious? Absolutely. Was she ruthless? Without a doubt, but she was also intelligent, strategic, and incredibly adept at navigating a world designed to keep her powerless. She turned beauty from a passive quality into an active, dynamic tool for influence, leaving an indelible mark on the Roman Empire. Her tale is a powerful reminder that influence can come in many forms, and that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't a sword, but a well-played smile. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this glimpse into the world of ancient Rome as fascinating as I do, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of the most intriguing figures from history. See you next time. Hello everyone and welcome back to our deep dive into the lives that shaped the Roman Empire. Last time, we left Agrippina the Younger back in Rome. Her exile finally over, but returning was just the first step. Today, we're exploring how she navigated the treacherous waters of the imperial court to not only survive, but to thrive, capturing the attention and, ultimately, the heart of the most powerful man in the world, Emperor Claudius. When Agrippina returned, the court was a viper's nest of intrigue. The reigning Empress Messalina was notoriously jealous and had already eliminated rivals. Agrippina knew she had to be cautious. She wasn't just a political player. She was a mother, fiercely protective of her young son, Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, who you might know by his later name, Nero. His safety was her paramount concern, and securing her own position was the only way to guarantee it. So, how did she do it? Agrippina played the long game. She understood that direct confrontation with Messalina was a death sentence. Instead, she cultivated an image of quiet dignity and traditional Roman virtue. She was the dutiful niece of the emperor, a grieving widow, and a devoted mother. She avoided the lavish parties and scandalous behavior that defined Messalina's circle. This wasn't just an act, it was a strategy. By presenting herself as the opposite of the current empress, she created a powerful contrast that would not go unnoticed. While she appeared reserved in public, behind the scenes, Agrippina was a master networker. She used her lineage as the daughter of the beloved General Germanicus to her full advantage. Veterans of her father's campaigns, influential senators, and powerful courtiers were all part of her web. She didn't demand loyalty. She earned it through shared history, subtle reminders of her prestigious bloodline, and promises of future influence. She was building a base of support, brick by brick, right under Messalina's nose. Claudius, for his part, was growing increasingly weary of Messalina's excesses. He was an emperor who, despite his own eccentricities, valued order and tradition. Agrippina's composed and respectable demeanor was a breath of fresh air. He began to see her not just as his niece, but as a stable and intelligent presence at court. He started confiding in her, seeking her opinion on matters of state. This was the opening Agrippina had been waiting for. She never overplayed her hand. Her advice was always thoughtful, well-reasoned, and framed in a way that made Claudius feel like the decision was his own. She might gently say, "My dear uncle, your wisdom in this matter is, as always, profound. Perhaps considering the long-standing loyalty of the senator's family might further strengthen your position." She was massaging his ego while steering him towards her allies. It was a subtle, brilliant form of manipulation. She made herself indispensable, not through demands, but through her perceived wisdom and unwavering support. The turning point came with Messalina's ultimate downfall. Her brazen affair and mock marriage to a senator, while Claudius was away, was an act of treason he could not ignore. With Messalina executed, the position of empress was vacant. The court was thrown into a frenzy as powerful freedmen and senators pushed their own candidates forward. 3 women were considered, but Agrippina held all the cards. This is where her years of careful planning paid off. Her allies in the court immediately began to champion her cause. One of Claudius's most trusted advisors, the freedman Palliser, who was rumored to be Agrippina's lover, argued her case persuasively. He highlighted the strategic advantages of the union. Marrying Agrippina would consolidate the Julio-Claudian dynasty, uniting the two main branches of the imperial family. It would bring her son Nero, a direct descendant of Augustus, into the imperial household, securing the line of succession. Pallas argued that Agrippina was a mature, proven woman of imperial blood. Unlike the other candidates, she wasn't some young girl who could be easily manipulated. She was a partner who could help Claudius govern, and, crucially, by marrying his own niece, Claudius would keep power concentrated within the family, preventing an outsider from gaining influence through marriage. To a man like Claudius, who was often insecure and paranoid about conspiracies, this argument was incredibly compelling. Agrippina wasn't just a potential wife, she was a political solution. She represented stability, lineage, and security. Publicly, the idea of an uncle marrying his niece was a taboo that needed to be overcome. But Agrippina's supporters orchestrated a masterful campaign of public persuasion. Senators gave speeches in the forum arguing for the match for the good of the state. The Roman people, who still adored the memory of her father Germanicus, were largely supportive. The Senate quickly passed a special decree to legalize the marriage, and so, in the year 49 AD, Agrippina the Younger married her uncle, Emperor Claudius. She had achieved what once seemed impossible. She had gone from a disgraced exile to the most powerful woman in the Roman Empire. She wasn't just an empress. She was a Corula in all but name. Her portrait began appearing on coins alongside Claudius's. An unprecedented honor. She was granted the title of Augusta, a title previously held only by Livia, the wife of Augustus. Agrippina had gained Claudius's trust, and with it, a share of his power. Her position was secure, but for a woman of her ambition, this was not the end goal. It was merely the beginning of the next, more audacious phase of her plan, ensuring that her son, Nero, would be the one to inherit the throne. And as we'll see in our next chapter, she would stop at nothing to make that happen. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If you're fascinated by the power plays and personalities of ancient Rome, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do miss our next episode. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into history's most fascinating power players. Today, we pulling back the curtain on a topic that's as old as power itself. Scandal. Specifically, we're looking at how the private lives of the elite became public weapons. It's a story of whispers, ambition, and the birth of a tactic that still shapes our world today. Now, imagine a time before social media, before tabloids, even before newspapers as we know them. How did gossip travel? It moved through handwritten letters, quiet conversations in gilded drawing rooms, and coded messages passed between servants. In the highest circles of society, everyone knew everyone, and more importantly, they knew everyone's secrets. This wasn't just idle chatter. It was a form of currency. Knowing about a rival's secret affair or a hidden debt gave you leverage. It was information that could be deployed at the perfect moment to discredit them, to block their advancement at court, or to turn public opinion against them. Think of it as an invisible battlefield, where reputations were the casualties. Let's look at some of the earliest examples. In the royal courts of Europe, the line between personal and political was almost non-existent. A king's choice of a mistress, for instance, wasn't just a private matter. It was a political statement. Who was her family? Which faction did she belong to? Her influence could elevate her relatives to positions of immense power, creating resentment and jealousy among the established aristocracy. This is where the whispers would begin. Rumors would be strategically planted to undermine the new favorite. Did you hear she comes from a family of merchants? One noble might say to another, or, I heard her brother is deeply in debt. These weren't just mean-spirited remarks. They were calculated attacks designed to chip away at her credibility and, by extension, the king's judgment. The goal was to create a narrative. The narrative might be that the king was being foolishly led by an unworthy woman, or that he was neglecting his duties for personal pleasure. Once this story took hold among the elite, it could be devastating. It created divisions, weakened the monarch's authority, and could even provide a justification for rivals to rally support against him. Let's consider a classic case. Anne Boleyn, in the court of Henry VIII. Before she was queen, she was the subject of intense gossip and slander. Her opponents, loyal to Catherine of Aragon and the Old Guard, spread rumors about her character, her family's ambition, and her influence over the king. They painted her as a manipulative outsider who was leading the king and the entire country down a dangerous path. This campaign of whispers was a powerful weapon. It isolated and created a constant atmosphere of suspicion and fueled the political opposition to Henry's desire for a divorce. The rumors that were used to build her up as a threat were the very same ones later twisted and used to justify her downfall. Her alleged escapades, once whispered as a sign of her seductive power, were later presented in court as evidence of treason. It shows how the same story can be used for different ends, depending on who is telling it and why. This tactic wasn't limited to royal courts. In the burgeoning republics and early democracies, scandal became a tool for political rivals. A candidate espoused could be dug up and selectively presented to the public to make them seem morally unfit for office. Did they have a youthful indiscretion? A failed business venture? A private letter with some ill-chosen words? In an era where honor and reputation were paramount, even a hint of impropriety could be ruinous. A political pamphlet, anonymously printed and distributed, could allege all sorts of misdeeds, while the accused might know it was a lie, proving it was another matter entirely. The damage was done the moment the whisper entered the public consciousness. The seed of doubt was planted. This is a crucial point. The truth of the scandal often mattered less than its impact. The accusation itself was the weapon. It forced the target to go on the defensive, to waste time and resources refuting the claim, and it distracted from their actual political agenda. It was a game of mudslinging, and the goal was simply to see what would stick. What's so fascinating is how these early scandals set a precedent. They established a playbook for how to use personal information for political gain. First, identify a target. Second, find or create a piece of compromising information. Third, leak it through informal but influential channels, a well-placed courtier, a popular pamphleteer, a society hostess known for her love of gossip. Finally, watch as the rumor takes on a life of its own, forcing your rival to react and weakening their position. These early scandals reveal a fundamental truth about power. It's not just about armies and laws. It's also about perception and narrative. He who controls the story often controls the outcome. The whispers in the corridors of power were just as important as the decrees signed in the throne room. They were the unofficial, unregulated, and often brutal side of the political game. It's a legacy we still live with. The methods have changed. We now have 24-hour news cycles and viral social media posts instead of pamphlets and court whispers, but the underlying principle remains the same. The private lives of public figures are still seen as fair game, and scandal is still one of the most potent weapons in the arsenal of political warfare. So as we continue our journey, remember this foundation. The idea that a person's private life could be used to destroy their public one was uninvented in the 20th century. It was perfected centuries earlier, in the opulent, high-stakes world of the elite, where a single whisper could be the difference between a throne and a chopping block. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden side of history. Let me know in the comments what do you think about this topic. See you in the next video. Welcome back to our series on the most compelling figures of ancient Rome. Today, we're delving deeper into the intricate world of Empress Messalina, exploring a chapter of her life where passion and politics became indistinguishable, her legendary political seductions. Now, it's easy to dismiss Messalina's story as one of pure scandal, but that would be missing the bigger picture. In a world where women, even empress, were largely excluded from the formal corridors of power, Messalina found other ways to exert her influence. She understood that in the high-stakes game of the Roman court, personal relationships were the real currency. Her affairs weren't just random, they were calculated moves on a political chessboard. Let's look at some of the key players. One of the most famous examples is her relationship with Gaius Silius. Silius was not just a handsome aristocrat, he was the designated consul for the following year, a man poised at the very peak of Roman political life. His family was influential, his reputation was strong, and his future was bright. By aligning herself with him, Messalina wasn't just choosing a lover. She was forging a powerful political alliance. Think about it. A partnership between the Empress and the next consul in waiting. This was a direct challenge to the established order, and a way for Messalina to secure her own power base, independent of the often unpredictable Emperor Claudius. Ancient historians like Tacitus paint a picture of an affair that was shockingly public. They claim Silius was so infatuated that he divorced his own noble wife to be with Messalina. They would meet openly, showered each other with gifts, and Silius's home virtually became an imperial residence. While these accounts are likely exaggerated for a dramatic effect, the core truth remains. This relationship was a public statement. It signaled to the rest of the Roman elite where power was coalescing. Senators and knights who wanted favor wouldn't just petition Claudius. They would have to go through Messalina and her inner circle. But Silius was just one piece of the puzzle. Messalina also cultivated relationships with influential generals and provincial governors. Take Lucius Vitellius, a seasoned politician and military commander who had served with distinction in the East. He was known for his cunning and his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics. Messalina reportedly engaged in a close, and some say intimate, relationship with him. Why Vitellius was a key figure who could ensure the loyalty of the legions abroad. In an empire constantly on edge about military coups, having the allegiance of top generals was paramount for survival. By binding men like Vitellius to her through personal favors and intimacy, Messalina was essentially neutralizing potential threats and turning them into allies. She was weaving a web of personal loyalty that stretched from the Senate floor in Rome to the military camps on the frontiers. Another figure to consider is Menestor, a famous actor. While not a politician in the traditional sense, Menestor was a superstar of his time, a public figure with immense popularity and access to elite social circles. His connection to the Empress blurred the lines between her personal life and her public image. By controlling a figure of popular culture, Messalina could subtly influence public opinion and perception. It was another way of demonstrating her reach and power, showing that her influence extended beyond the Senate and into the very heart of Roman society. So, was this romance or political strategy? The answer is both. Messalina was blurring the lines intentionally. In her world, affection could be a tool, and a strategic alliance could be sealed with a passionate embrace. She used the limited avenues available to her as a woman to build a formidable network of supporters. She offered ambitious men a fast track to power and influence, a direct line to the heart of the empire. In return, she gained their loyalty, their resources, and their protection. This network was essential for her survival and for securing the future of her son, Britannicus, as the next emperor. This strategy was incredibly effective, but also incredibly dangerous. Every affair created not just an ally, but also rivals and enemies. The wives who were cast aside, the politicians who were overlooked, the courtiers who felt threatened by her growing power. They were all watching and waiting. The more powerful Messalina became, the more she isolated herself and Claudius from the traditional power structures of the Senate. She was essentially creating a parallel government, a shadow court that revolved around her. The climax of this strategy, her infamous marriage to Gaius Silius while Claudius was away, can be seen as the ultimate political gamble. Was it a desperate act of a woman in love, or a calculated attempt at a coup d'etat? Historians have debated this for centuries, but if we view it through the lens of political seduction, it looks like a final, audacious move to formalize her power base and install a new emperor she could control completely. She wasn't just choosing a new husband, she was attempting to choose a new emperor for Rome. This intricate dance of power and passion is what makes Messalina's story so eternally fascinating. She wasn't simply a victim of her desires or a one-dimensional villain. She was a master political operator who used the weapons she had at her disposal to fight for her position and her son's future in one of the most ruthless political arenas in human history. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that history is often shaped not just in the battlefield or the Senate, but in the quiet, intimate spaces where personal relationships and political ambitions collide. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Messalina's world. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in our series. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series on the powerful women of ancient Rome. Today, we re-delving into the story of one of the most formidable figures in the Julio-Claudian dynasty, Agrippina the Younger, the woman who was not just an empress, but the true power behind the throne. When Agrippina married her uncle, Emperor Claudius, it wasn't a simple love match. It was a calculated move, a masterstroke in her quest for ultimate influence. Claudius, often depicted as a bumbling, easily swayed ruler, found himself under the spell of his intelligent and ambitious new wife, and Agrippina. She wasted no time in capitalizing on her position. Almost immediately, the court began to change. Agrippina was no empress to stay in the shadows. Roman historians like Tacitus and Suetonius tell us that she wasn't just consulted on matters of state. She was often the one making the final decisions. Imagine this. While Claudius officially presided over meetings, Agrippina would sit nearby, sometimes concealed behind a curtain, listening, judging, and directing the flow of politics. Her presence was a constant, powerful force. She wasn't just the emperor's wife. She was his co-ruler. One of her first major achievements was securing her own honors. She was granted the title of Augusta, a prestigious honor previously bestowed only posthumously or to wives of long-reigning emperors. Agrippina received it while Claudius was very much alive, a clear signal to all of Rome that her status was equal to his. Coins were minted with her portrait alongside Claudius's, sometimes even facing him as an equal. This was unprecedented propaganda, broadcasting her authority across the empire. But her influence went far beyond titles and coins. It seeped into the very fabric of the Roman government. Agrippina was a master of political maneuvering. She understood that to secure her power, and more importantly, the future of her son, Nero, she needed allies in high places. And what better way to create allies than to place them there yourself? This is where we see the evidence of rampant nepotism and, as many historians argue, corruption. Agrippina began a systematic process of replacing Claudius's trusted advisors and officials with men loyal to her. One of the most significant moves was her orchestration of the appointment of Sextus Afranius Burrus as the head of the Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian Guard were the emperor's personal bodyguards, a powerful military force within the city of Rome itself. Their loyalty was paramount. By installing Burrus, a man who owed his entire career to her, Agrippina effectively took control of the emperor's security and a key military unit. Another key ally was Seneca the Younger, the famous Stoic philosopher. He had been exiled years earlier, but Agrippina saw his value. She recalled him from exile and appointed him as a tutor to her young son, Nero. This was a brilliant move. Not only did it give Nero a world-class education, but it also placed one of Rome's greatest minds in her debt. Seneca and Burrus would become her right-hand men, a powerful duo who would help her manage the empire and smooth Nero's path to the throne. But as Agrippina's network of loyalists grew, so did the list of her enemies. Those who were loyal to Claudius or to his son, Britannicus, were systematically pushed aside. There are accounts of powerful freedmen who had once held immense sway over Claudius, losing their influence overnight. Senators who dared to question her authority found themselves facing trumped-up charges. Their political careers ruined, their property confiscated, and some even exiled or executed. The sources paint a picture of a climate of fear and suspicion in the court. Agrippina's network of spies was said to be everywhere. She used her influence to enrich her supporters, granting them provincial governorships, lucrative contracts, and priesthoods. This wasn't just about rewarding loyalty. It was a strategic investment. These men, scattered across the empire, would ensure that her will was done. Far from the watchful eyes of Rome, one of the most telling examples of her power was her ability to influence imperial policy. She was instrumental in the founding of a new colony in her birthplace in modern-day Germany. The city was named Colonia Claudia Era Agrippinensium in her honor. Today, it's the city of Cologne. Think about that for a moment. A Roman city, a veteran colony, named after an empress. This was a demonstration of power on a scale no woman had achieved before her. Her primary goal, however, was always the advancement of her son, Nero. Every political maneuver, every appointment, every piece of legislation she influenced was a step towards placing him on the throne. She convinced Claudius to officially adopt Nero, even though Claudius had his own biological son, Britannicus. Nero was older, and Agrippina argued that this would provide stability for the future. Once adopted, Nero was immediately pushed into the public spotlight. He was given honors and titles that far surpassed those given to the younger Britannicus. He was married to Claudius's daughter, Octavia, further cementing his connection to the imperial family. Agrippina was essentially creating an emperor waiting on Claudius, whether besotted, intimidated, or simply too weak to resist, went along with it all. The Roman elite watched all of this unfold. They saw an empress who attended Senate meetings, who dictated foreign policy, and who controlled the levers of power with an iron grip. For a traditional Roman society, where women were expected to be modest and domestic, Agrippina was a terrifying and revolutionary figure. She was accused of greed, of ruthlessness, and of an insatiable lust for power. Was she corrupt? By modern standards, absolutely. She used her public office for personal gain and to benefit her family and allies. Was it nepotism? Without a doubt. She built a government of people who were loyal to her, not necessarily to the state or to the emperor. But in the cutthroat world of Roman imperial politics, this was also the game of survival. Agrippina knew that her position and her life depended on her ability to control the court. She wasn't just a power behind the throne. For a time, she was the throne. Her influence over Claudius was so absolute that it laid the groundwork for the next chapter of Roman history, the controversial and dramatic reign of her son, Nero. Thank you so much for joining me today as we explored the incredible power of Agrippina the Younger. Her story is a testament to what ambition and political genius could achieve, even in a world designed to limit female power. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. See you next time. Hello history buffs, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're stepping into the heart of ancient Rome, into the deafening roar of the Colosseum. We're not just here to talk about gladiators and epic battles, but to uncover the hidden story behind the sand and spectacle. How did these brutal games become the ultimate tool of political power? Let's find out. Imagine this. You're an ordinary Roman citizen. Life is tug. The city is crowded, and the future is uncertain. Then, the emperor announces games. Free food, thrilling entertainment, a day where all your worries fade away. Who would you thank for this incredible gift? The emperor, of course. This was the genius of Roman bread and circuses. The games weren't just entertainment, they were a powerful transaction. The emperor provided a spectacle, and in return the people gave him their loyalty and adoration. He was a simple, yet incredibly effective way to keep a massive, potentially restless population happy and under control. The Colosseum itself was a masterpiece of political messaging. When the Flavian dynasty built it on the former site of Emperor Nero's extravagant private lake, they were sending a clear signal. They were demolishing a symbol of tyranny and returning that land to the people in the form of a grand public amphitheater. Every stone was a declaration. We are different. We rule for you, the people of Rome. This act of public generosity forever linked their family name with the city's most iconic landmark, cementing their legacy and legitimacy. Now, let's talk about the main event. When the emperor entered the arena, the crowd would erupt. His every move was watched, his reactions noted. The games offered a rare moment of direct, albeit carefully managed, interaction between the ruler and his subjects. The emperor could gauge public opinion by the cheers and jeers. He could grant a gladiator's life with a thumbs up, a display of mercy, or condemn him with a thumbs down, a show of absolute power. This wasn't a democratic vote, it was a performance. The emperor was playing the role of the ultimate judge, the master of life and death, reinforcing his godlike status in front of tens of thousands of captivated spectators. The gladiators themselves were walking symbols. Many were prisoners of war, criminals, or slaves. When a gladiator representing a conquered tribe, like a Gaul or a Briton, was defeated by a Roman-style fighter, the message was unmistakable. It was a reenactment of Rome's military victories, a live-action propaganda piece. The fight wasn't just between two men. It was a symbolic struggle between Roman order and foreign chaos. And almost every time, in the heart of Rome, order was shown to triumph. It was a powerful reminder to everyone watching. Resisting Rome is futile. The games also featured exotic animal hunts, called venal. The Romans scoured their vast empire for lions from Africa, bears from Germany, and crocodiles from Egypt. These animals were then unleashed in the arena to be hunted and killed. On the surface, it was a display of thrilling danger, but the deeper meaning was a demonstration of Rome's reach and dominance. The empire was so powerful it could literally bring the wild, untamed corners of the world to the city and conquer them for public amusement. It was a symbolic taming of the natural world, proving that nothing was beyond the grasp of Roman power. One of the most powerful tools in the emperor's arsenal was the munus, or gift of the games. An emperor's generosity was measured by the scale and splendor of the spectacles he sponsored. Emperor Trajan, for example, celebrated his victory in Dacia with games that lasted for 123 days and involved over 10,000 gladiators. This wasn't just a party, it was a colossal display of wealth and power. It told the world that the Roman Empire was so rich and so mighty that it could afford to spend a fortune on public entertainment. This created a cycle of expectation. Future emperors were compelled to match or exceed the generosity of their predecessors, constantly reinforcing the idea that a powerful emperor was a generous one. Even the seating arrangement in the Colosseum was a map of Roman society and power. The emperor and the Vestal virgins had the best seats, of course. Senators sat in the next tier, followed by the equestrian class, then wealthy citizens, and so on, with the poorest citizens and women relegated to the very top, the nosebleed section. Your seat in the Colosseum was a public declaration of your social status. The entire structure was a microcosm of the rigid Roman hierarchy, visually reinforcing everyone's place in the social order, all under the watchful eye of the emperor. Every time people attended the games, they were participating in a ritual that affirmed this structure. So, how did this all come together as a tool of manipulation? The games created a powerful emotional bond between the ruler and the ruled. They distracted the populace from real issues like poverty, corruption, or political instability. They provided an outlet for aggression and a shared cultural experience that united a diverse and massive population under a single Roman identity. By controlling the spectacle, the emperors controlled the narrative. They could present themselves as generous benefactors, divine judges, and mighty conquerors, all within the electrifying atmosphere of the arena. It was political theater on the grandest scale imaginable. The gladiatorial games were far more than just brutal sport. They were a sophisticated and highly effective system of mass communication and social control. The sand of the arena soaked up not only blood, but also the anxieties of the Roman people, and from it grew the foundation of imperial power. The roar of the crowd was the sound of a populace entertained, distracted, and ultimately dominated. The spectacle was the message, and the message was power. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the Colosseum. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into history. See you in the next video. Have you ever heard of a marriage that wasn't just a union of two people, but a calculated move in a deadly game of power? Let's dive back into the life of our protagonist, where wedding bells chimed with the sound of sharpening daggers. Her marriage, far from a fairy tale, was a strategic alliance, a political masterstroke designed to consolidate power and neutralize threats. But in the shadowy courts of this era, alliances were as fragile as glass, and the line between a partner and a pawn was dangerously thin. Imagine the pressure. Every smile, every shared glance, every whispered sweet nothing could be a calculated act. Her personal life became completely entangled with her political ambitions. It wasn't just about choosing a spouse, it was about choosing a side in a conflict that was simmering just beneath the surface. This marriage sent ripples through the court, unnerving her rivals and forcing them to rethink their strategies. It was a bold declaration that she was not just a player in the game, but was determined to set the rules. But as power grew, so did the danger. Whispers began to circulate, dark and persistent rumors that linked her name to plots against her enemies. Was she a victim of slander, or was there a kernel of truth to the accusations? The air grew thick with suspicion. A prominent rival, a man who had long been a thorn in her side, met an untimely and mysterious end. Officially, it was an accident, a tragic misfortune, but the timing was just too perfect, too convenient. The court buzzed with speculation. People pointed fingers in the shadows, and many of those fingers pointed directly at her. The evidence was circumstantial, of course. A loyal servant seen in the wrong place at the wrong time. A cryptic letter that could be interpreted in a dozen different ways. But in the court of public opinion, suggestion was as powerful as proof. Her opponents seized on the scandal, painting her as a ruthless manipulator, a black widow who would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. They used the incident to try and isolate her, to turn her allies against her, and to shatter the image of strength and stability she had so carefully constructed. This incident marks a crucial turning point. It shows just how high the stakes were. To survive, let alone to rule, required a level of cunning and ruthlessness that few possessed. She had to navigate a world where a poisoned chalice was as common a tool of statecraft as a treaty. Her personal relationships, particularly her marriage, were both her greatest strength and her most profound vulnerability. Her husband, now bound to her fate, had to decide where his loyalties truly lay, with his wife, or with the powerful factions that sought her downfall. And this was just the beginning. Another plot soon surfaced, this time targeting a rising star in a rival faction. The plan was audacious, complex, and bore the hallmarks of a brilliant, strategic mind. The scheme involved forged documents, paid informants, and a carefully orchestrated campaign of misinformation designed to publicly disgrace and politically cripple the target. The intricacy of the plot was staggering, and again, though no direct proof could be found, the whispers started anew. They said only one person had the intelligence and the audacity to devise such a scheme. Her alleged involvement became the scandal of the season. It demonstrated a frightening new level of political maneuvering. This wasn't just about removing an opponent from the board. It was about dismantling their entire network of support, turning their friends into enemies, and salting the earth so that their political career could never recover. It was a masterclass in manipulation, whether she was the architect or simply the beneficiary of these plots. The outcome was the same. Her power grew, and her enemies dwindled. Think about the psychological toll this must have taken, living every day knowing that you are both the hunter and the hunted. Every meal could be your last. Every friend could be a foe. Her personal life, the space that should have been a sanctuary, was now the primary battlefield. The love and trust that formed the foundation of a marriage were tested to their absolute limits. A spouse was either a willing co-conspirator, a pawn in her game, or a potential threat living under the same roof. This period of her life is a chilling study in the fusion of the personal and the political. Her marriage wasn't a love story. It was a political thriller. The alleged plots weren't just crimes. They were acts of political survival. She was forced to operate in a gray area where morality was a luxury she couldn't afford. To understand her is to understand that, in her world, the path to the throne was often paved with betrayal and bloodshed. Her story forces us to ask a difficult question. What would we do to survive in her position? How far would we go to protect ourselves and secure our legacy? The web of manipulation she allegedly wove was as beautiful as it was deadly. She played on the ambitions of some, the fears of others, and the greed of everyone else. She knew how to turn a rival's strength into a weakness, and how to create chaos from which only she could benefit. Her court was a chessboard, and she played with the lives of men and women as if they were pieces. It's a dark and fascinating chapter that reveals the true cost of ultimate power. The lines between love and strategy, loyalty and betrayal, were not just blurred. They were erased completely. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most complex sagas. If you find these stories as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what's coming next. We have so much more to uncover together. See you in the next video. Video begins. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today we're re-diving deep into one of the most fascinating and often misunderstood aspects of Cleopatra's reign. Her use of seduction, not just as a personal choice, but as a powerful political strategy. Let's peel back the layers of myth and legend to understand the brilliant mind at work. When we think of Cleopatra, images of beauty and allure often come to mind. But she was so much more than a pretty face. She was a pharaoh, a brilliant intellectual who spoke multiple languages, and a master strategist. In a world dominated by powerful men, she understood that to protect Egypt and secure her throne, she needed to use every tool at her disposal. And one of her most effective tools was her undeniable charisma and her profound understanding of human desire. Let's start with her first major Roman connection, Julius Caesar. This wasn't just a romance. It was a calculated political masterpiece. Imagine the scene. Caesar is in Alexandria, and Cleopatra, then a young claimant to the throne, needs to get past her brother's guards to meet him. Does she send a messenger? No. She has herself rolled up in a carpet and smuggled into his private chambers. It was a move of incredible audacity and drama. This act wasn't just about surprising him. It was a statement. It showed she was bold, resourceful, and willing to take immense risks. When she was unrolled at his feet, she wasn't just presenting herself. She was presenting herself as the rightful and courageous leader of Egypt. Caesar, a man who appreciated ambition and bold moves, was immediately captivated. Their connection wasn't purely physical. It was a meeting of two brilliant political minds. She offered him the wealth of Egypt and a strategic foothold in the East. He, in turn, offered her the military might of Rome to secure her throne. Their relationship produced a son, Caesarion, whom Cleopatra hoped would one day unite the empires of Egypt and Rome. It was a strategic alliance, sealed with personal intimacy. After Caesar's assassination, Rome was plunged into chaos. Power was split, and Cleopatra had to navigate this new, dangerous landscape. This is where Mark Antony enters the picture. Antony was now one of the most powerful men in the Roman world, controlling its eastern territories. Cleopatra knew she needed his support to keep Egypt independent. So, how did she approach him? She staged one of the most spectacular entrances in history. When Antony summoned her to Tarsus, she didn't arrive as a subordinate. She sailed up the Cydnus River in a magnificent golden barge, dressed as the goddess Venus, with attendants fanning her and the scent of perfume wafting to the shore. She wasn't just meeting a general. She was creating an unforgettable spectacle. She invited Antony to a series of lavish banquets on her ship, completely outshining his own attempts at hospitality. She wasn't just trying to attract him. She was demonstrating her power, her wealth, and her divine status as a pharaoh. She was showing him that she was his equal, a queen worthy of partnership, not conquest. By aligning herself with a goddess, she tapped into both Roman and Egyptian beliefs, creating an aura of mystique and authority. Antony was utterly enchanted, not just by her beauty, but by her wit, her intelligence, and the sheer force of her personality. Their relationship became a powerful political alliance. For Antony, Cleopatra provided the immense financial resources he needed for his military campaigns. For Cleopatra, Antony provided the military protection that kept Rome from annexing Egypt. They presented themselves as a new divine couple, Dionysus and Venus, a power duo ready to rule the East. They had 3 children together, cementing their personal and political bond. It's crucial to understand that for Cleopatra, these relationships were never just about love or passion. They were about survival of her kingdom and her dynasty. She used the desires of the most powerful men in the world as a key to unlock political advantage. She turned their attraction to her into a shield for her country. She understood that in the high-stakes game of international politics, controlling the narrative and influencing the key players was everything. She wasn't a passive object of desire. She was the active agent, the director of her own story. She used charm, intellect, and pageantry to build alliances, secure her throne, and protect her people. She transformed what others might have seen as a weakness being a woman in a man's world into her greatest strength. Cleopatra was a master of political theater, and her relationships with Caesar and Antony were her grandest productions. They were brilliant strategic moves that kept Egypt independent for over 2 decades. Their story teaches us that power comes in many forms. It isn't always about armies and battles. Sometimes, it's about understanding psychology, crafting a compelling image, and strategically using charisma to achieve your goals. Cleopatra's legacy is not that of a simple seductress, but of a formidable political leader who wielded every weapon in her arsenal with genius and precision. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Cleopatra's strategy. I hope this gave you a new perspective on this incredible historical figure. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell, so you won't miss our next exploration into history. We'll see you in the next video. Hello, and welcome back to our series. Today, we're diving into one of the most audacious and scandalous tales from ancient Rome. A story so bold it almost seems like fiction. This is the story of Empress Messalina and her secret lover, Gaius Silius. Get ready, because this chapter of history is a wild ride. By the year 47 AD, Valeria Messalina, the third wife of Emperor Claudius, was at the zenith of her power. She was young, beautiful, and the mother of the heir to the throne, Britannicus. From the outside, she had everything. But behind the palace walls, Messalina was living a life of breathtaking risk, one that would ultimately lead to her spectacular downfall. Her name had become synonymous with excess and insatiable desires, but even for her, what she was about to do was beyond belief. Enter Gaius Silius. He wasn't just any man. Silius was described as the most handsome man in Rome. He was a senator from a distinguished family and a consul designate, meaning he was on the fast track to the highest echelons of Roman politics. He was intelligent, charismatic, and married, but none of that mattered when he caught the eye of the empress. The affair didn't start subtly. Messalina was utterly consumed by her passion for Silius. She showered him with wealth and honors, stripping other noble homes of their heirlooms to furnish his own. She would visit his house openly, sometimes with a large entourage, blurring the lines between a secret affair and a public statement. The Roman elite watched, whispering in disbelief. How could she be so reckless? The Emperor Claudius was known to be preoccupied with his administrative duties, often oblivious to the court's intricate dramas. But this was a new level of audacity. For Silius, this was an incredibly dangerous game. He was entangled with the most powerful woman in the empire, the wife of the emperor. He knew the risks. The historian Tacitus tells us that Silius was not a naive victim of the empress's seductions. He understood the peril but was also dazzled by the rewards. Messalina's favor meant immense power and riches. He divorced his own wife, the noble Silena, to fully commit to the empress. At this point, it seemed less like an affair and more like a partnership. But what was their endgame? This is where the story takes a turn from a mere scandal into a full-blown conspiracy. Messalina wasn't content with Silius just being her lover. She wanted more. She wanted to make him her husband. While Claudius was still alive and emperor, it's a plan so audacious it defies logic. Did they truly believe they could get away with it? Some historians suggest that Messalina and Silius were plotting to overthrow Claudius. They may have been banking on the support of certain factions within the Praetorian Guard and the Senate who were dissatisfied with Claudius's rule. Perhaps they believed that if they presented a united front, a new imperial couple, the state would simply accept the change. Others argue it was a desperate act of a woman who felt her position was precarious. Claudius was getting older, and if Messalina's power as empress regent for her young son Britannicus would be challenged, especially by Agrippina the Younger, another powerful and ambitious woman at court. By marrying Silius, she might have been trying to secure her future and her son's claim to the throne. Whatever the motive, the plan moved forward. In the year 48 AD, while Emperor Claudius was away from Rome, traveling to the port city of Ostia to oversee the grain supply, Messalina made her move. She decided to marry Gaius Silius. And not in secret, they held a public wedding ceremony in Rome. Imagine the scene, a full-blown marriage festival, complete with witnesses, signed contracts, and sacrifices to the gods, all for the wedding of the sitting empress to her lover, while her husband, the emperor, was just a few miles away. The city was stunned. It was a direct, public challenge to Claudius's authority and his honor. It was, in essence, an act of treason. The news traveled slowly at first, but when it reached the imperial court at Ostia, it caused an explosion. Claudius's most trusted advisors, his powerful freedmen Narcissus, Pallas, and Callistus, were thrown into a panic. They had long tolerated Messalina's behavior, perhaps even profited from it. But this was an act of open rebellion. Their own positions, and indeed their lives, were now at stake. If Silius became emperor, they would surely be replaced, if not executed. Narcissus, the emperor's chief secretary, knew he had to act decisively. The biggest challenge was Claudius himself. The emperor was known to be indecisive, and still held a deep affection for Messalina. Narcissus feared that if Messalina got a chance to speak to Claudius, she might be able to talk her way out of it, persuade him she was innocent, and turn his wrath on them instead. So, Narcissus orchestrated the entire response. He didn't even tell Claudius the full extent of the situation at first, fearing the emperor would waver. He simply informed him that his rule was in jeopardy, and that they needed to return to Rome immediately. On the journey back, Narcissus sat in the carriage with Claudius, feeding him the sordid details of the wedding, reinforcing the betrayal, and painting Messalina and Silius as conspirators who had to be stopped at all costs. When the imperial party arrived back in Rome, the city was in a state of high tension. Narcissus, acting with the emperor's authority, had already ordered the Praetorian Guard to arrest Silius and his key supporters. Silius put up no fight. He was captured and, knowing his fate was sealed, asked only for a quick death. He was executed immediately. Many others who had attended the wedding or were part of their circle met the same fate. But what about Messalina? She was at the gardens of Lucullus, one of her favorite estates, when she heard that Claudius was returning and that her plan had collapsed. Her bravado evaporated, replaced by terror. She tried to go out to meet Claudius's procession, with her children, Britannicus and Octavia, in tow, hoping the sight of his family would soften his heart. But Narcissus made sure she couldn't get near him. She returned to the gardens to await her fate. Claudius, back in the palace, was overwhelmed. After overseeing the executions, he wavered. He retired for dinner and, after a few glasses of wine, is said to have ordered that the poor woman be brought before him the next day to plead her case. Narcissus heard this and knew he couldn't let that happen. He saw his own death warrant in the emperor's softening resolve, taking matters into his own hands. He told the Praetorian tribune on duty that the emperor had ordered Messalina's execution. It was a lie, but it was a believable one. The soldiers went to the gardens of Lucullus. They found Messalina on the floor, with her mother, Lepida. Lepida, who had been estranged from her daughter during her years of power, was now trying to convince her to take her own life with dignity. But Messalina couldn't do it. She was weeping, full of self-pity. When the soldiers burst in, the tribune stood over her in silence, while another officer drew his sword and ended the life of the 28-year-old empress. The infamous story of Messalina and Gaius Silius was over. It's a tale of passion, ambition, and a shocking miscalculation. A story of a secret, and the not-so-secret, wedding that shook the Roman Empire to its core and ended in a bloodbath. Thank you so much for joining me for this incredible chapter of Roman history. If you found the story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into the annals of Roman history. Today, we're shifting our perspective, stepping out of the public forum and into the private chambers of an emperor. We're going to explore one of history's most notorious relationships, but from a side rarely considered. The viewpoint of the man at the center of it all, Emperor Claudius. What did he truly see? What did he feel? And how did he become the last person in Rome to learn the truth about his wife, Messalina? Let's set the scene. Claudius, a man who had lived his entire life in the shadows, dismissed as a fool, unexpectedly finds himself on the throne. He was a scholar, not a politician or a soldier, and perhaps, for the first time, he felt he had a true partner in his young, vibrant wife, Messalina. She was the mother of his children, his empress. For Claudius, who had been belittled and overlooked for decades, This partnership must have felt like a validation, a source of profound pride and, yes, love. Imagine Claudius, buried in state papers, managing the vast and complex Roman Empire. He's dealing with provincial disputes, military campaigns, and endless petitions. In his mind, Messalina is running the imperial household, raising their children, Britannicus and Octavia, and securing his legacy. He trusted her. Why wouldn't he? She was the granddaughter of his own beloved brother, Germanicus. In the cutthroat world of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, that kind of family connection meant everything. This trust wasn't just marital, it was dynastic. He saw her as the cornerstone of his new imperial family. So, when did the whispers start? Probably quietly at first. A senator's confiscated villa, a rival's sudden retirement. To Claudius, these might have been explained away. He was an emperor constantly on guard against conspiracies. Perhaps he saw these actions, if he noticed them at all, as Messalina being fiercely protective of him and their children. He might have even interpreted her ruthlessness as a form of loyalty. He wasn't a fool, but love and trust can create powerful blind spots. He likely dismissed the early rumors as court gossip, the typical slander that follows powerful women. The historian Tacitus tells us that Claudius was blind to the scandals of his own house. This wasn't necessarily because he was stupid, but because his world was insulated. He was surrounded by powerful freedmen Pallas, Narcissus, Callistus, who managed the flow of information. They were his eyes and ears. For a long time, it seems they had their own reasons to protect Messalina, or at least to not expose her. She was a powerful ally to them as well. The emperor was in a bubble, and as long as Messalina's activities didn't directly threaten the state's stability, it was easier for everyone to look the other way. Think about it from Claudius's perspective. He is a man in his 50s, married to a teenager who is celebrated for her beauty and fertility. He adores his children. He's busy running an empire. Is he really going to believe the salacious tales about his wife, the mother of his heir, engaging in behavior so scandalous? It defies belief. It would have been easier, more comforting, to believe it was all lies. Vicious rumors spread by his enemies to undermine his reign. He had every reason to want to believe in the fantasy of his happy family. The turning point, the moment the veil was torn from his eyes, was an act of audacious betrayal that even Claudius could not ignore. Messalina, while Claudius was away from Rome, publicly married her lover, Gaius Silius. This wasn't just an affair. This was a direct political challenge. It was a symbolic and literal attempt to replace the emperor. She wasn't just being indulgent anymore. She was committing treason. The news was brought to Claudius not by a senator or a general, but by his most trusted freedman, Narcissus. 10 sources say Claudius was hesitant, asking over and over again, "Am I still emperor?" The question reveals everything. It shows his complete and utter shock. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It shattered his entire perception of his reality, his power, and his own judgment. The love he felt had been used as a weapon against him. The trust he had given so freely had been mocked on a public stage. In that moment, Claudius Siscola, the husband, had to become Claudius the emperor. The man who had been slow to see the truth now had to act with brutal decisiveness. His trusted freedmen, fearing for their own lives now that Messalina's coup was exposed, pushed him to act. The order was given for her execution. We can only imagine the storm of emotions he must have felt. Fury, heartbreak, humiliation, and perhaps a profound and soul-crushing sadness. He had loved the woman who had plotted his downfall. After her death, the Senate decreed a damnatio memoriae, an attempt to erase her from history. Her name was chiseled off monuments, her statues torn down. And Claudius, the sources say he showed little emotion in public and never spoke of her again. But silence doesn't mean absence of pain. It can be a way of coping with a wound too deep to ever truly heal. He had been betrayed by the person he should have been able to trust the most, and his reign and his life would forever be marked by the shadow of the Empress, who ruled his heart and nearly cost him his empire. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into Claudius's world. It's a powerful reminder that history is made of real people with complex emotions. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up And do you unforget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do unmiss our next chapter. See you next time.